Clara Rivera's hands trembled as she stared at the worn photograph tucked between crisp $100 bills in the stranger's wallet. Her own face smiled back at her, 7 years old, holding a red balloon, wearing the same tattered dress she'd forgotten she ever owned. The billionaire sitting across from her had gone completely still, his dark eyes watching her reaction like a predator studies prey. "How do you have this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain hammering the diner's windows. "But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me tell you how a girl who'd never been kissed, never been loved, and never caught a break in her 22 years of life found herself face to face with a man who apparently knew her before she even knew herself. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this one. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. 3 months earlier, Clara's world was smaller than a postage stamp. She lived in Millbrook, population 847, where everyone knew everyone's business except their own. The kind of place where dreams went to die slow, quiet deaths. Her father died when she was 8. Heart attack at 34. One day, he was teaching her to ride a bike. The next day, her mother was selling his tools to pay for the funeral. That's when Clara learned life doesn't ask permission before it destroys everything you love. Her mother, Maria, tried her best. She cleaned houses for the wealthy families on Elm Street, scrubbing toilets for people who spent more on their dogs grooming than Maria made in a month. Clara watched her mother's hands grow rough and red, watched her back bend a little more each year, watched hope drain from her eyes like water from a broken cup. By the time Clara turned 16, she was working too, babysitting, cleaning, anything that paid cash. She never dated, never went to parties, never experienced the fumbling teenage romances her classmates whispered about in school hallways. Not because boys didn't notice her, they did. Clara had inherited her father's kind eyes and her mother's delicate features. But she built walls around herself higher than the mountains surrounding their little town. "I don't have time for boys," she'd tell her mother when Maria asked why she never brought anyone home. But the truth was scarier than that. Clara was afraid that if she let someone close enough to see her life, really see it, they'd run. Who wants to date a girl whose electricity gets shut off twice a year? Who wants to kiss lips that have known more hunger than happiness? So Clara stayed pure. Virgin lips, virgin heart, virgin soul. She told herself it was a choice, but deep down she knew it was just another thing poverty had stolen from her. After high school, while her classmates headed to college or decent jobs in the city, Clara stayed behind. Her mother's arthritis was getting worse, and someone had to pay the bills. She got hired at Murphy's Diner, the only restaurant in Millbrook that stayed open past 8 p.m. The pay was terrible, the customers were worse, but it was steady work. Murphy's Diner sat on Route 9, the highway that connected their forgotten town to the outside world. Most customers were truckers, traveling salesmen, or lost souls who took the wrong exit. Clara learned to read people quickly, who tipped well, who tried to grab her when she leaned over to refill their coffee, who left without paying when she turned her back. She developed a system. Smile just enough to seem friendly, but not enough to encourage the wrong kind of attention. Keep conversations short. Never share personal details. Trust no one completely. It wasn't much of a life, but it was survival. Clara's days blended together like watercolors in the rain. Wake up at 5:30. Check on her mother's medication. Walk to work because their car died 2 years ago and they couldn't afford to fix it. Work the breakfast rush. Walk home for lunch. Help her mother with physical therapy exercises the insurance wouldn't cover. Walk back for the dinner shift. Walk home after midnight. Repeat. Some nights, lying in her narrow bed listening to her mother cough in the next room, Clara would stare at the ceiling and wonder if this was all there was. 22 years old, and she felt ancient. Worn down like the linoleum floors of the diner, like the welcome mat at their front door, like her mother's wedding ring that had grown loose on fingers that used to be plump and happy. She'd never been to a fancy restaurant, never owned anything that wasn't secondhand, never traveled farther than the county hospital where they took her mother for x-rays. She'd never felt a man's hands on her skin, never experienced the breathless anticipation of first love, never even been curious about what she was missing. Her virginity wasn't precious to her. It was just another reminder of everything she'd never had the chance to experience. But Clara had something that couldn't be bought or sold, something that poverty couldn't touch, even when it took everything else. She had kindness that ran soul deep, the kind that made her slip extra rolls to the hungry truckers who counted change for their coffee. She had resilience that bent but never broke, forged in the fires of loss and hardship. She had hope, buried so deep she sometimes forgot it was there, but still flickering like a candle in a storm. She didn't know it yet, but that hope was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. The first time she saw Adrian Hale, Clara thought he was lost. It was a Tuesday night in October, rain turning the world gray and slick. The diner was nearly empty except for old Pete nursing his third cup of decaf and a couple of teenagers sharing a plate of fries they couldn't really afford. Then the door opened, and everything changed. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair and darker eyes. His suit looked like it cost more than Clara made in 6 months. Not the kind of man who wandered into Murphy's diner by accident. Not the kind of man who belonged in their world at all. Clara felt something she'd never experienced before. Not attraction, exactly, though he was undeniably handsome. It was more like recognition, as if some part of her soul knew him, even though her mind was certain they'd never met. He chose a booth by the window, the one with the cracked vinyl seat that nobody liked. Clara approached with her order pad, professional smile in place, but when their eyes met, the words dried up in her throat. "Coffee?" she managed to ask, though her voice came out smaller than intended. "Please." His voice was deep, cultured, with the kind of careful pronunciation that spoke of expensive education and careful breeding. "And whatever you'd recommend." Clara blinked. Most customers ordered without looking up from their phones. This man was giving her his complete attention, as if she were the most important person in the world. "The meatloaf is good," she said, then immediately felt foolish. A man in a $1,000 suit probably didn't come to small-town diners for meatloaf recommendations. But he nodded seriously. "Meatloaf, it is." As Clara walked away, she felt his eyes on her back. Not in the leering way she was used to from some customers, but with an intensity that made her nervous and curious at the same time. Who was he? What was he doing here? And why did she feel like she'd been waiting her whole life for him to walk through that door? She had no idea that the mysterious stranger sitting in booth 7 was about to turn her carefully ordered world completely upside down. She had no idea that he carried secrets that would make her question everything she thought she knew about her own life. But most of all, she had no idea that he'd been carrying her childhood photograph in his wallet for the past 14 years, waiting for the right moment to find her again. Adrian Hale wasn't supposed to be in Millbrook, 300 miles from Manhattan, sitting in a cracked vinyl booth, eating meatloaf that probably came from a can. But here he was, and for the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. The business world knew him as ruthless. The Ice King, they called him in Forbes magazine. The man who'd turned his father's modest real estate company into a billion-dollar empire before his 30th birthday. The man who fired executives over coffee and demolished companies before lunch. He owned skyscrapers in Manhattan, penthouses in Miami, and a collection of expensive cars he never had time to drive. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the girl refilling his coffee cup, trying not to stare at him while pretending to clean the table next to his booth. Clara moved differently than the women in his world. No calculated steps, no practiced smiles, no agenda hiding behind every glance. She was real, untouched by the corruption and greed that poisoned everyone he knew. When she'd recommended the meatloaf, there wasn't a trace of sarcasm or condescension. She genuinely wanted him to have something good. Adrian had eaten in restaurants where a single meal cost more than most people made in a week. Michelin stars, celebrity chefs, wine older than some of his employees. But this meatloaf, served on a chipped plate by a girl who probably made minimum wage, tasted better than anything he'd had in years. Maybe it was because she'd served it with kindness. If you're still wondering how this story ends, make sure you're subscribed because things are about to get interesting. Adrian studied Clara when she wasn't looking. The way she tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The way she bit her bottom lip while calculating tips. The way her whole face lit up when old Pete told her a joke that wasn't even funny. She was beautiful, but not in the artificial way he was used to. No designer clothes, no professional makeup, no surgical enhancements. Just natural beauty that came from a pure heart and a spirit that poverty hadn't managed to break. He'd been planning this visit for months. His private investigator had given him a thick folder filled with details about Clara Rivera. Where she worked, where she lived, how much money she made, what time she walked to work every morning. But seeing her in person was different than reading reports. She was stronger than he'd expected, more guarded, and there was something in her eyes, a wariness that suggested life had already taught her not to trust too easily. Good. She was going to need that strength for what was coming. Adrian finished his meal and left a $100 tip on a $15 check. He watched Clara's eyes widen when she discovered the money, watched her look around the diner to make sure no one else saw, watched her carefully fold the bills and slip them into her apron pocket. She didn't run after him to give it back. She didn't make a big show of gratitude. She just accepted it with the quiet dignity of someone who understood both the value of money and the gift of unexpected kindness. Outside, Adrian sat in his BMW for a long time, watching Clara through the diner window. She moved with purpose now, cleaning tables and refilling salt shakers. But he caught her glancing toward the door every few minutes. Looking for him, maybe, or trying to convince herself he'd been real. His phone buzzed with text messages. Board meetings he was missing. Deals worth millions waiting for his signature. His assistant had been calling all day, probably assuming he'd been kidnapped or had some kind of breakdown. Billionaires didn't just disappear to small towns without explanation. But Adrian ignored the messages. For the first time in his adult life, business wasn't his priority. Clara Rivera was his priority. The promise he'd made 14 years ago was his priority. He started the engine and drove back toward the city, but he knew he'd return. Wild horses couldn't keep him away now that he'd found her. 3 days later, Clara was wiping down tables when she saw the BMW pull into the parking lot again. Her heart did something strange, a little skip that she told herself was just surprise, not anticipation. The mysterious man walked in like he owned the place, but his eyes went straight to her booth by the window, the same booth as before. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks as she approached with the coffee pot. "Back for more meatloaf?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Actually, I was hoping you'd recommend something different today." There was something in his voice, playfulness, maybe, that she hadn't heard before. Like he was genuinely interested in her opinion, not just making conversation. "Well," Clara said, settling into the game, "the apple pie isn't terrible. And Murphy makes a decent burger if you don't mind it a little greasy." Apple pie sounds perfect. As she walked away to get his order, Clara felt those dark eyes on her again. But this time, instead of making her nervous, it made her curious. Who was he? What did he do for a living that let him wear $1,000 suits in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon? And why did he keep coming back to their little diner when he obviously belonged in places much fancier than this? When she returned with the pie, he was looking out the window at the rain starting to fall. "Peaceful here," he said without looking at her. "Most people would call it boring. Most people are wrong about a lot of things." Clara paused in the act of refilling his coffee. There was something in his tone, not sadness exactly, but a kind of weariness that seemed too deep for someone who looked like he had everything. "You're not from around here," she said. It wasn't a question. New York, Manhattan. Long way to come for apple pie. For the first time, he smiled. Really smiled, not just the polite expression he'd worn before. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger and somehow more dangerous at the same time. "Maybe I'm not here for the pie." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning Clara wasn't sure she understood. Her cheeks burned, and she had to look away. "I should get back to work," she mumbled, but she didn't move. "What's your name?" The question was soft, but it felt huge. Like giving him her name would change everything. "Clara, Clara." He repeated it like he was testing how it sounded. "I'm Adrian." "Nice to meet you, Adrian." But even as she said it, Clara had the strangest feeling they'd met before. Not in person. She would have remembered those eyes, but like she'd been waiting for him without knowing it. Over the next week, Adrian came to the diner every few days. Always the same booth, always asking Clara to recommend something different. He never stayed long, never got personal, but there was something building between them. A tension that made Clara's hands shake when she poured his coffee, made her stomach flip when she saw his car in the parking lot. Her mother noticed a change in her. "You're humming again," Maria said one evening as Clara helped her with her evening medication. "I hum. Not for months. You haven't. Not since your father died, really." Clara felt a pang of guilt. Had she really been that sad for so long that her own mother noticed when she showed signs of happiness? "There's this customer," she admitted. "He's different." Maria's eyes sharpened. "Different how?" "Rich. From a city. But he's not like what you'd expect. Mija, men with money want things from girls like us. Things we can't afford to give." Clara knew her mother was trying to protect her, but the words stung anyway. What if he's not like that? What if he is? That night, Clara lay in bed thinking about Adrian's smile, the way he said her name, the careful way he always left exactly enough money to cover his bill plus a generous but not insulting tip. Was her mother right? Was she being naive? The next time Adrian came in, Clara watched him more carefully. The expensive watch, the manicured hands, the way he held himself like someone used to being obeyed. He was from a different world, that was obvious. But when he looked at her, she didn't feel like a conquest or a curiosity. She felt seen. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said as she set down his coffee. "Of course. Why do you keep coming here? I mean, there have to be better places to eat between here and Manhattan." Adrian was quiet for so long Clara thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he looked up at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Sometimes you find something worth a drive." Before Clara could figure out what that meant, Adrian's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his whole demeanor changed. The warmth left his eyes, replaced by something cold and hard. "I have to take this," he said, standing and walking toward the door. Clara watched him through the window as he paced in the parking lot, his voice sharp and his gestures angry. Whatever conversation he was having, it wasn't pleasant. When he came back inside, he looked like a different person. "I have to go," he said, throwing money on the table without counting it. "There's a situation I need to handle." He was almost at the door when he stopped and turned back. "Clara," he said, and her name sounded different in his mouth now. "Urgent. Be careful walking home tonight, okay?" Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, leaving Clara staring after him with more questions than answers. The storm hit Millbrook 3 nights later like God's own temper tantrum. Thunder shook the diner's windows, and the lights flickered every few minutes, threatening to plunge them into darkness. Clara had sent Murphy home early. No point in both of them getting soaked for the 2 customers brave enough to venture out in this weather. She was wiping down the counter when Adrian walked in, his expensive suit drenched and his usually perfect hair dripping water onto Murphy's worn linoleum floor. But it wasn't the rain that had Clara's attention. It was the look in his eyes. Wild, desperate, like a man who'd been running from something and finally realized he couldn't run anymore. "Coffee?" Clara asked, but her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Please." He slid into his usual booth, but his movements were different tonight. Jerky, nervous, like he couldn't sit still. Clara brought him coffee with shaking hands, hyper-aware of the fact that they were alone in the diner for the first time. "Rough day?" she asked. Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. You could say that. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating his face for a split second. Clara saw something there that made her breath catch. Pain. Deep, soul-crushing pain that he'd been hiding behind expensive clothes and careful manners. "Want to talk about it? You wouldn't understand." The dismissive words should have hurt, but Clara heard the real message underneath. He wanted to tell her. He was just scared she'd run if she knew the truth. "Try me." Adrian looked at her for a long moment, like he was weighing something in his mind. Then he reached for his wallet to pay for the coffee he'd barely touched. That's when Clara's world stopped. Among the crisp $100 bills and gold credit cards, she caught sight of an old, worn photograph. Her hands flew to her mouth as she recognized the image. Herself as a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, holding a red balloon at some long-forgotten fair. She was wearing a blue dress with tiny flowers, the same dress her mother had sewn for her birthday before money got too tight for such luxuries. The photograph was faded, creased from years of being folded and unfolded, carried and handled. But it was definitely her. No question, no possibility of mistake. "How do you have this?" The words came out as a whisper. Adrian's face went white. His eyes dropped to the wallet in his hands, and Clara watched him realize what she'd seen. For a moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was rain pounding against the windows and Clara's heart beating so loud she was sure he could hear it. "Clara, how do you have my picture?" Her voice was stronger now, edged with something between fear and fury. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't some random customer who'd wandered into her diner by accident. This was planned, calculated, deliberate. Adrian closed the wallet, but it was too late. The damage was done. "There's something I need to tell you," he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm in his eyes. "I think you better. Not here. Not like this." "Then when? And where?" Clara's voice was rising now, weeks of curiosity and confusion and growing attraction boiling over into something close to panic. "Who are you? What do you want from me? How long have you been watching me?" "I haven't been watching you," Adrian said quietly. "I've been looking for you." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. "Looking for her? Why? How long? What did that even mean?" "I need to go," she said, backing away from his table. Her hand was shaking so badly she nearly dropped the coffee pot. "Clara, please." "No. Just no. Whatever this is, whatever you want, I can't. I won't." She turned and ran toward the back of the diner, toward the kitchen where she could lock the door and try to make sense of what just happened. But Adrian's voice stopped her cold. "Your father asked me to protect you." Clara spun around. Adrian was standing now, his expensive suit still dripping, his face a mask of pain and determination. "My father is dead. I know. I was there when he died." The world tilted sideways. Clara gripped the counter to keep from falling as memories crashed over her. Her father's funeral, the closed casket, the hushed conversations between adults who thought she wasn't listening. The official story, heart attack at work, found by a co-worker, died instantly. But there had been whispers, strange men in dark suits asking questions, police officers who visited their house and spoke to her mother in voices too low for Clara to hear. Insurance money that came through faster than it should have, enough to pay for the funeral and keep them afloat for almost a year. "You're lying," Clara whispered. "I wish I was." Adrian pulled out his phone and showed her a picture. Clara's knees nearly gave out as she recognized her father's face, younger than she remembered but unmistakably him. He was standing next to a teenage Adrian, both of them smiling at the camera. "He saved my life when I was 17, Adrian said quietly. "And when he was dying, he made me promise to take care of you if anything ever happened to him. That photograph, your mother gave it to him to carry for luck. He had it with him the night he died." Clara's world was spinning out of control. Nothing made sense. Her father had never mentioned knowing anyone named Adrian. He'd worked construction, not the kind of job where you met billionaire teenagers. And he died of a heart attack, not in some situation where he was saving people's lives. "I don't understand," she said. "I know, and I'm sorry it has to be this way. But Clara, there are things about your father's death, about your family, that you don't know. Things that could put you in danger if the wrong people find out I've made contact with you." "What kind of danger?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "The kind that got your father killed." The lights flickered again, and in the momentary darkness, Clara saw her reflection in the diner window. She looked like a ghost, pale and shaken and utterly lost. When the lights came back on, Adrian was watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. Not the careful politeness or growing warmth of their previous encounters. This was raw, desperate, like a man watching something precious slip through his fingers. "Clara, I know this is a lot. I know you're scared, but I need you to trust me." "Trust you?" Clara's voice cracked. "You've been lying to me since the day we met. You have my picture in your wallet like some kind of stalker. You're telling me my father's death wasn't what I thought it was. And now you want me to trust you?" "Yes," Adrian said simply. "Because if you don't, you might end up dead just like you did." Clara didn't sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed listening to rain hammer the trailer's thin roof, staring at the water stain that looked like her father's profile if she squinted just right. Everything Adrian had told her felt impossible, but the photograph in his wallet had been real. Her father's face in that old picture had been real. How had her father known a billionaire? When? Why had no one ever mentioned it? The next morning, Clara called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Murphy grumbled, but Clara barely heard him. She spent the day going through her father's things, the few boxes her mother had saved, stored in their bedroom closet like relics from a life they could no longer afford to remember. Most of it was exactly what she expected. Were clothes, a few tools, some photographs of their small family during happier times. But at the bottom of the last box, wrapped in an old t-shirt, Clara found something that made her heart stop. A leather journal, worn soft with age. Her father's handwriting filled page after page, documenting dates and times and meetings Clara had never known about. And there, mentioned again and again, was a name that made her hands tremble. Adrian Hade. The entry started when Clara was just 6 years old. Brief at first, met with AH today. Situation getting worse. Then longer, more detailed. AH says his father's business partners are asking questions. Thinks they might be getting close. Need to be more careful about contact. Clara flipped through pages with growing horror. Her father hadn't just known Adrian. He'd been protecting him. From what? The journal didn't say clearly, but there were references to dirty money and dangerous people and keeping the boy safe until he's old enough to handle the truth. The last entry was dated 3 days before her father's death. H turned 18 today. Legal adult now, but still not safe. His father's partners know he's been talking to someone, and they're getting desperate. I think they're planning something. If anything happens to me, I told H to find Clara when she's old enough. She deserves to know the truth about her family, about what we did, about why we had to disappear. Clara read the entry 5 times before the words sank in. What they did, why they had to disappear. Her father hadn't been protecting Adrian from someone else's dangerous secrets. They'd been sharing dangerous secrets together. When her mother came home from cleaning houses, Clara was sitting at their tiny kitchen table with the journal open in front of her. Mija, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Mom, Clara said carefully, I need you to tell me the truth about how Dad died. Maria's face went white. She set down her purse with shaking hands and sank into the chair across from Clara. Where did you find that? It was in his things. Mom, who is Adrian Hale? For a long moment, Maria just stared at the journal. Then she started crying, deep, heartbroken sobs that seemed to come from somewhere in her chest. Clara had never seen her mother cry like this, not even at the funeral. I tried to protect you, Maria whispered. I thought if you never knew, you'd be safe. You could have a normal life. What did Dad do? He didn't do anything wrong, Maria said fiercely. Your father was a good man. But sometimes good men get caught up in bad situations because they're trying to help people. Maria told her a story that sounded like something from a movie. Adrian's father had been involved with dangerous people, loan sharks, money launderers, criminals who used legitimate businesses as fronts. When Adrian was a teenager, he'd stumbled on evidence that could have put these people in prison for the rest of their lives. Your father was working construction on one of their buildings, Maria explained. He overheard them planning to kill Adrian to keep him quiet. So he warned him, helped him disappear for a while until Adrian could figure out what to do with the information he had. And they killed Dad for it. We don't know for sure. The heart attack was real. The autopsy confirmed that. But he'd been getting threatening phone calls for weeks before he died. Strange men following him. I think the stress of trying to protect Adrian and keep us safe it was too much for his heart. Clara felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Her father hadn't died of random bad luck. He died because he tried to save someone, and the stress had killed him as surely as a bullet. Why didn't you tell me? Clara's blood turned to ice water in her veins. What do you mean they're coming? Adrian was already standing, his phone pressed to his ear. Marcus, I need a team at the diner on Route 9. Now. He listened for a moment, then his jaw tightened. I don't care what it costs. Just get them here. Adrian, you're scaring me. He ended the call and looked at her with eyes that had gone completely cold. This wasn't the man who'd been gently flirting with her over coffee and pie. This was someone else entirely, someone dangerous. "The people who killed your father," Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. "They've been watching me for years, waiting for me to lead them to something they can use against me. Today they figured out what that something is. Me, you." Clara felt the walls of the diner closing in around her. "What do they want?" "To hurt me by hurting you. To make sure I never testify against them. To finish what they started when they killed your father." Adrian grabbed her hand, and Clara was shocked by how cold his skin was. "Clara, I need you to listen to me very carefully. In about 10 minutes, some very bad men are going to show up here looking for you. If you're on the edge of your seat right now, smash that like button and make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to get intense." "We have to call the police," Clara said. "The police can't help us. Some of them might even be working for the other side." Clara's mind reeled. "Other side? Adrian, what are you talking about? What did your father's business partners actually do?" Adrian was moving around the diner now, checking windows, testing the back door. Money laundering, drug trafficking, murder for hire. They built an empire on blood money, and when I turned 18, I inherited evidence that could destroy all of them. "So why haven't you used it?" "Because the moment I do, everyone I care about becomes a target." He stopped moving and looked at her. "Including you." Clara understood now why Adrian had stayed away for so long, why he kept his distance even after finding her. Being close to him was a death sentence. "You should have left me alone," she whispered. "I tried. God knows I tried. But your father made me promise to protect you, and I've been doing that from the shadows for 14 years. Anonymous scholarships that you never applied for, medical bills that mysteriously got paid, job opportunities that opened up just when your family needed them most." Clara's breath caught. "The scholarship to community college that I turned down because Mom got sick? That was me. The time our rent was 3 months behind and the landlord suddenly said there had been a mistake with the payment records? Me. The specialist who agreed to treat Mom's arthritis for free? Me." Clara sank into the booth, overwhelmed. For years, she thought they were just lucky sometimes, that good things occasionally happen to good people. But it had been Adrian all along, watching over them like some kind of guardian angel. "Why?" she asked. "At first, because I owed your father a debt I could never repay." Adrian sat down across from her, and for a moment, his mask slipped completely. Clara saw the lonely boy he must have been at 17, terrified and alone and carrying secrets too big for his shoulders. "But then I started watching you grow up from a distance, and it stopped being about duty." "What did it become?" "Love," Adrian said simply. "I fell in love with a girl I'd never met, who didn't know I existed. I fell in love with your strength, your kindness, the way you took care of your mother, even when you were just a kid yourself. I fell in love with your pure heart in a world that tried to make you cynical." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You don't even know me. I know you slip extra food to the hungry truckers when you think no one's looking. I know you walk old Pete home when it's raining because his arthritis acts up. I know you've never been kissed because you don't think you're worth loving, but Clara, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." The words hung in the air between them, more intimate than any physical touch. Clara felt something crack open in her chest. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of trust. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I've never, with anyone." "I know." Adrian's voice was gentle now. "And I would never ask you to do anything you weren't ready for. But Clara, I need you to understand something. The men who are coming tonight, they won't be as patient as I've been. They'll use every weapon they have against you, including your innocence." Before Clara could ask what he meant, headlights swept across the diner windows. Not the usual pickup trucks or family sedans that frequented Murphy's. These were black SUVs with tinted windows, moving too fast for the rain-slick roads. Adrian cursed under his breath. "They're early." Clara's hands started shaking. "What do we do?" "We run." Adrian grabbed Clara's hand and pulled her toward the back exit, but they were too late. The front door of the diner exploded inward, and 3 men in dark suits stepped through the wreckage. They moved with the casual confidence of people who'd done this before. "Adrian Hale," the tallest one said, his voice carrying a slight accent that Clara couldn't place. "It's been a long time. Kozlov." Adrian stepped in front of Clara, shielding her with his body. "I figured you'd show up eventually. You've been very difficult to find. Fortunately, your affection for this young lady made you careless." Clara pressed herself against Adrian's back, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. These men looked like movie villains, but she could smell the gun oil and violence on them. This was real. This was happening. "Let her go," Adrian said. "Your fight is with me." "You're saying my father was a criminal?" "I'm saying your father was a prince who chose to become a pauper rather than inherit a throne built on blood." "And Clara," Adrian's voice dropped to a whisper, "that makes you a Romano, which means you didn't just inherit your father's debt to me." "What else did I inherit?" "Everything," Adrian said grimly. "His enemies, his allies, his secrets, and most importantly, his birthright. Clara, you're not just the girl I fell in love with. You're the lost heir to a criminal empire worth billions of dollars. And now that they know I exist..." Adrian's jaw tightened. Now every crime family in the country is going to want either your loyalty or your blood. The safe house was a mansion hidden in the mountains of Colorado, surrounded by enough security to protect a small country. Clara stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her bedroom, looking out at snow-covered peaks that seemed to touch the sky, and wondered how her life had become something out of a thriller movie. It had been 3 days since Adrian's revelation about her father's true identity. 3 days of trying to process the fact that she was the heir to a criminal empire she'd never known existed. 3 days of avoiding the conversation she knew they needed to have. "You can't hide up here forever," her mother said from the doorway. Clara turned around. Maria looked older somehow, as if the stress of the past few days had aged her years in a matter of hours. "I'm not hiding. I'm thinking." "About Adrian?" Clara's cheeks flushed. Her mother had always been able to read her too easily. "About everything." Maria came to stand beside her at the window. "He loves you, you know. Really loves you. I can see it in the way he looks at you, like you're the most precious thing in the world." "And I love him too," Clara admitted. "But Mom, what kind of future can we have? I'm apparently some kind of crime princess. He's got a target on his back because of evidence he's carrying, and everywhere we go, people want to kill us. Your father and I had the same problems." Clara looked at her mother in surprise. "What do you mean? I wasn't born Maria Rivera, Mija. I was Maria Santos, daughter of a federal judge who'd spent his career putting away men like your father's family. When Michael and I fell in love, it should have been impossible. Our families were on opposite sides of a war that had been going on for generations. But you made it work, for a while, until the weight of all those secrets became too much to bear, and your father decided he'd rather lose everything than raise his daughter in that world." Clara thought about her childhood, about the way her father had always seemed sad even when he was happy, like he was carrying some invisible burden. Now she understood what that burden had been. "Do you regret it? Giving up your old life for love?"